Hey, Lucas here, and today we're going to talk about getting wide and fast on the Micro Four Thirds system. So what I have here is the RJ Lens Turbo, which is basically a focal reducer which adapts EF lenses on the Micro Four Thirds system. To be honest, I'm really excited to finally being able to do a review on this kind of product, because this one is the first focal reducer that lets you adapt EF lenses on the Micro Four Thirds system. Riding on the EF mount has some great benefits, because you're not only able to use EF lenses on it, but you can also use anything that adapts on EF with this focal reducer. This includes M42, Olympus Pentax K, and even Nikon G. But maybe you already have a nice set of Nikon G lenses, or maybe only M42 lenses. In that case, RJ still has you covered, because you can get these focal reducers natively also in M42, Nikon G and Canon FD, with most likely more mounts to come. A very important note I have to make about this adapter is that there are no electronic connections whatsoever. So if you only have active Canon glass, like the Canon L series, you won't be able to change the aperture, for example. My Blackmagic cinema camera, however, also does not feature any electronic connections for the lenses. So it would not make many sense for me to get a lens adapter which features electronic connections. On another note, I don't even own any lens that requires an active connection for the Canon EF mount. Only manual glass, like the Samyang 35mm, for example. So this is the Tokina 11-60mm, which is basically the only autofocus lens that I own and use for my filmmaking. However, I adapt this one because this is in a Nikon mount with a Nikon G adapter to maintain aperture control to my EF adapter, and that way I can even boost this one and still maintain the aperture control. Pretty neat. So what is it that makes these little adapters so great? Basically, a focal reducer does what the name says. So it reduces the focal length of the lens. So every lens projects a certain sized image circle onto a surface. In this case, of course, the camera's sensor. So a full frame lens now will project a relatively large image circle. However, on a crop sensor, of course, because it's a crop sensor, left and right from the sensor will be lost some information that this lens actually will project. So what the focal reducer now does, it takes the whole image circle, scales it practically down to project it on a smaller size, so a smaller surface, resulting in a wider field of view. So the factor the focal length is reduced with is 0.71. But not only that, your lens also becomes one stop faster, which is pretty neat, especially in the darkness. So now the big question, is this adapter actually as good as it sounds? I think we should find out. So at first I wanted to see how the lens turbo really affects the wide angle of the lens. So this is a shot without the lens turbo, and this is with the lens turbo, and obviously we can already see that the angle is a lot wider. So the factor should be 0.71. That means when we set the scale to 71%, it should match just fine. So now we have it scaled. Now maybe let's try to match it a bit better, because maybe I hit the tripod or something. So this does not work perfectly anymore, but it fits pretty good. Not too perfect up here and such things. However, it works pretty nice. Pretty cool. So the factor is about right, which is pretty nice to know. And yeah, pretty nice. We have simply a wider image. What we can already see at this real-life representation is that the edges on the lens turbo are not too bad. To view the sharpness a bit better, I shot some stills at full resolution with the GH2 from an ISO chart, which is not perfectly aligned within this comparison. However, it will do as the purpose. So also the ISO chart isn't printed perfectly, but we will see what we want to see in this comparison. So on the right you can see I used the Samyang 35mm, and in this case wide open. And you can also see when I use a different aperture just written underneath. So yeah, now let's take a look at the center sharpness. So we start with the center sharpness, and as we can see here, this is the normal common adapter, so no lens turbo, and with the lens turbo, interestingly enough, we get a pretty good image, and subjectively it looks a bit better. So basically we don't have these much chromatic aberrations, which is pretty normal in contrast areas like black and white in this case. So it looks somewhat better, but I have to warn you in advance that this is not a very good representation of the real life, so just take a look. We will just take a look at this in a bit further. So maybe look at f2, have a look at f2. So this is f2 without the lens turbo. Still a bit of the purple fringing of the chromatic aberrations. And with the lens turbo, we don't have that. At least not that bad.
and it's a bit soft, of course, but still not the purple, which is pretty nice. And both are pretty sharp for the pure resolution. And at f2.8, we still are a bit purple without a lens turbo, and with the lens turbo we are much better. And even if you ask me, it's also a lot sharper. So in an f4, this is the comparison that I made, we are finally somewhat even. So looks pretty good. However, let's have a look at the edges, because on the edges this is to be expected to be a bit worse. So this is with the lens turbo, we are a bit soft here, have some greenish chromatic aberrations, and we are much sharper on without the lens turbo. And now at f2.8 with the lens turbo, quite soft again, and without the lens turbo, much better. Also, again, the greenish chromatic aberrations. So at f2, it's quite obvious. So we get really soft on the edges. In real life, this has not to be a big problem. However, it degrades the image on the edges. However, in the center, it's pretty good, which is pretty nice still. And as we can see, chromatic aberrations, purple versus green, but a lot sharper without the lens turbo. But we have to keep in mind now that that the lens turbo is a stop faster. So maybe let's have a look at the lens at 1.4 against the lens turbo at f2, because this is the same transmission of light that we get. So on the edges, clearly without lens turbo is much better, but in the center, if we look at that, it's most likely a lot better. I think we should now look a bit at the real life difference in this. And yeah, so now let's have a look at the more or less real world situation. So we have the little bar here and the battery in the center of the frame. So at first, maybe let's take a look at the edge of the frame. So this is wide open with the lens turbo, and this is f2 with the lens turbo. So one stop down, and it's not too bad in the edges if you ask me. So I think this is usable. So we have not too much information on the edge, but I think it's usable to me in the end. So but definitely not the worst to work with. And now let's have a look at the center here. So what we can see wide open on the lens turbo, we are a bit soft. So we are a bit soft, we get a bit of spill around the letters. When we step down now, we have it much better though, but wide open, it's not too good. When we compare this without the lens turbo, of course now we have the narrower field of view, so not as wide, we can see that wide open it's a lot better than, for example, the lens turbo, which is very spilly, very glowy around the letters. It's not perfect, but it's better than with the lens turbo, hands down, no problem. However, now I had in mind to try to frame both frames completely the same, with the same field of view. Of course, this does not work perfectly, and I failed to perfectly match it. And of course, because we are much closer with the camera to the object, we get a different parallax. However, we want to still compare the center sharpness. So this is the lens turbo at f2, step down, and this is the center of the frame. So pretty nice, pretty sharp, and at around the same field of view, of course, this is not scientific, but you get what I mean. We are a lot softer without the lens turbo. And in terms of another field of view, is that actually it's around the same depth of field that we get in terms of shallow depth of field at f2 with the lens turbo, like without the lens turbo at wide open at the same field of view. So basically, even though you don't get the additional stop of light, because of course we step down by one stop, we get a much better quality and the wider image, which is pretty nice to have in a real life situation. So what we see here right now is me standing outside, freezing a bit actually, to test a bit the sharpness in the real life, as we told before, because in the real life it's always the most interesting thing. So right now the lens is wide open, so at f1.4 it's still the Samyang 35mm, and I think it's actually quite okay to use. Now this is the same lens, but at f2, so we have stopped one step down, and I think we can already see how well it actually performs together with the lens booster, of course. Now this is a look through the Tokina 11 to 16mm at 11mm. It's not wide open, it's around f3.5 or f4. so slightly closed down. Usually on such heavy wide angles we have a bit of problems, especially with the edge sharpness. However, as we can see here right now with the lens turbo, we don't really get this problem. And this is pretty cool actually. So we can see some distortion, but this is normal with this lens, so not a fault of the lens turbo. And I think this shows pretty well how good this thing actually performs. So now I also wanted to see if the lens turbo affects the bokeh that the lens produces in some way, in some sort. And so I shot a test shot with the Canon 550D, which you can see here in the middle of the frame. Because the GH2 is a bit wider with the lens turbo attached, I had to resize it a bit to compare it better. The focus point on both lenses was here at this point on the electronical outside cable box, don't know the name. However, when we look at the 550D footage, where we have no lens turbo applied, of course, we get a bit of an oval shape towards the edge, but not too much, still just a bit. And in the middle we have nice round circles. So when we look at the GH2 footage with the lens turbo applied, what we see is that we get much more of an oval shape towards the edge, and it's a bit, it gets faster, sooner into this oval shape than the 550D. And also we get the oval shape with some sort of pointy end on the up and the down side of the lens. So it gets a bit more, what I will call a bit more trolly. But in the middle we still have the nice round discs, circles. However, keep in mind that the lens turbo affects the bokeh a bit, but not too much, but still a bit. So I still thought it would be worth mentioning.
I'm going to be honest with you. I'm freaking amazed by this adapter. I mean, seriously. Of course there may be some drawbacks, but especially regarding the sharpness, you could stop down by only one stop, have the same light transmission as with a common adapter, and still maintain a better quality. I mean, come on, this is a great deal. I didn't even pay $140 for this adapter, and I mean, this is a real steal. If you now also have a normal adapter without the focal reducing element, you can use every lens you own in 2 different setups. So now thanks for watching and staying with me. RJ Lens Turbo, great little product. If you want to, you can subscribe to my channel to stay tuned on other reviews that might come soon. Anyway, I'm Lucas. I thank you for watching and I see you next time. Bye.